Before we begin, take a second. If you're someone who enjoys deep, emotional stories that stay with you long after they end, then make sure you hit subscribe. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a moment in life where everything changes. Quietly, unexpectedly, and permanently. Now let me take you there. That night, sitting in a cramped roadside motel room, something inside me shifted, not dramatically, not in a way anyone else could see, but internally. Something realigned, something cracked, something awakened. The room itself was small, almost suffocatingly so. The kind of place you'd never choose unless you had no other option. Faded wallpaper, a flickering lamp in the corner, the faint hum of an old air conditioner struggling to do its job. There was barely enough space for two people, and yet somehow it felt too full. Full of silence. Full of thoughts that had gone unspoken for far too long. Full of emotions I had spent months, maybe even years, trying to ignore. And the only other person in that room was Gary. My stepson. People like to believe that life changes slowly, that everything unfolds step by step, giving you time to adjust, to prepare. But that's not always how it works. Sometimes life doesn't warn you. Sometimes it snaps. Logan had been gone for months. Work had taken him to another city. And at first, I told myself it was temporary, that we'd manage, that distance wouldn't matter. And yes, I missed him. Of course I did. But what started to weigh on me wasn't just the distance. It was the silence, the lack of effort, the slow, almost invisible fading of connection. Phone calls became shorter. Messages became less frequent. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a part of his life. Evenings became the hardest. The house would fall quiet, and that silence would settle in like a weight. Slowly, steadily, it carved something hollow inside me. A space I didn't know how to fill. A feeling I didn't know how to name. So when I asked Gary to drive me to visit his father, it felt like a simple decision, a practical one I hadn't imagined. Not even for a second. How things would unfold. The morning started like any other, but even then, something felt off. I remember standing in front of the mirror before leaving the house. On the outside, I looked composed, put together, normal, but underneath, there was restlessness, something unsettled, something searching. Gary was already in the kitchen when I came down. He was finishing breakfast, casually scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. When I asked him for the drive, he didn't hesitate. Instead, he smiled. That easy, effortless kind of smile. And joked about finally convincing his dad to upgrade his old car. I laughed it off. But what I didn't say, what I didn't even fully admit to myself, was how natural it felt to laugh with him. How easy it was. Too easy. We had been on the road for about 2 hours when everything changed. At first, it was just a sound, a sharp hiss, then a violent shudder, and then silence. The car rolled to a stop. Just like that. We tried everything, called mechanics, checked under the hood, waited, argued. Nothing worked. And as the sun began to set, reality set in. We weren't going anywhere that night. The motel wasn't a choice. It was the only option. When we opened the door and stepped inside, I felt immediate irritation. The room was even worse than I expected. Dim lighting, stale air, and in the center of it all, one bed. Just one. This is it, I muttered under my breath. Gary just laughed. It's one night, he said casually. We'll survive. His ease, his comfort with the situation should have calmed me, but instead it unsettled me. I showered first, not because I needed to, but because I needed a moment alone. The water ran over me, warm and steady, but it did nothing to quiet my thoughts. I kept reminding myself of the facts, simple, undeniable facts. I'm 47. He's 2. This is temporary. This means nothing. But the mind doesn't always listen to reason. Later that evening, after a quiet, almost awkward dinner, we returned to the room. Gary had already showered. He was asleep when I walked in, or at least, he looked like he was. His hair was still slightly damp, his robe loosely tied, and for a moment, I just stood there by the door, longer than I should have. What I felt in that moment wasn't simple, it wasn't just attraction, it was confusion, loneliness, a deep human need to feel seen, to feel like I still existed in someone's world. I shook the thought away, told myself it was nothing, just proximity, just circumstance, nothing more. I lay down on the very edge of the bed, careful, deliberate, keeping as much distance as possible. But in a room that small, distance is an illusion. At some point during the night, I felt it. Movement. Settle. Almost hesitant. I kept my eyes closed at first. Not because I was asleep, but because I wasn't ready to face what that moment might become. The air between us changed. It wasn't dramatic. Not intense in the way movies portray. It was quieter than that. More real. More dangerous. When our eyes finally met, no words were needed. There are moments in life where you stand at a boundary, a line you never thought you'd approach. And in that moment, you have a choice: step back, or step forward, knowing nothing will ever be the same again. We didn't rush. We didn't speak recklessly. There was no chaos. No impulsive explosion. Just awareness. To people, both carrying their own loneliness, both standing in the same quiet space, recognizing something neither of them had planned. What passed between us wasn't loud. It was deliberate. Careful. Unspoken. And in that moment, it wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't about crossing lines for the sake of it. It was about something far more human. The need to feel seen. To feel wanted. To feel alive again. The night blurred after that. Not into chaos, but into something softer. Warmer. A kind of closeness that only happens when emotions long buried finally rise to the surface. There were no promises. No declarations. No thoughts of tomorrow. Just a moment suspended in time. And then silence. Afterward, I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The weight of everything settling in slowly. Not regret. Not yet. Just awareness that whatever had happened, it mattered. Beside me, Gary was quiet, not proud, not careless. Just thoughtful. I'll never forget this place, he said softly. Neither would I. Morning came too quickly. As it always does. The world outside had already moved on. The car was repaired. The road was waiting. Everything looked normal again. We packed in silence. Careful. Neutral. As if routine could somehow erase what had happened. But routine doesn't erase memory. On the drive to pick up Logan, my thoughts were anything but quiet. Confusion. Guilt. A strange, undeniable sense of something else. Something I didn't want to name. Because the truth was, the breakdown hadn't just been mechanical. It had exposed something deeper. Cracks that had already been there long before that night. And as the road stretched out ahead of us, one thing became painfully clear: whether that moment would become a mistake, a secret, or a turning point, I didn't know yet. But life had shifted. Quietly. Irreversibly. And there was no pretending otherwise. If this story made you feel something, if it made you think, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the quietest moments in life are the ones that change us the most.